So the senator has been really outspoken about this. We've heard it in numerous of his meetings from sources, and he's even talked about it pretty publicly about the fact that he does not believe that GOP leadership in the Senate should have any kind of term limit. As we know, Senator McConnell had served for 18 years atop the Senate GOP. That's a really long time.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle, and I'm joined today by Congressional reporter Samantha-Jo Roth. SJ, you've written a story looking at Virginia, which has been a blue state for a while now. It has some roots as a redder state, but Republicans think they may be able to turn it back. What did you learn?
Yeah, so I will say that, Republicans here are treading very lightly. They do recognize that it is an uphill battle, but they're looking at certain polling and they're seeing that, former President Trump is doing significantly better than a lot of people would have ever thought that he'd be doing in Virginia. And so they see that as a sign that maybe, the tide is turning in Virginia. It is important to note that, Virginia does have a pretty popular Republican governor, Glenn Youngkin, and he has been embracing the former president. The two of them have not always been the friendliest, but it looks like they are moving forward with being friendly for the, sake of the election. And I think a lot of Republicans are looking at this as maybe this could be fertile ground for, a Trump upset. Of course, a lot of them are pretty hesitant to label Virginia as a battleground state. Right. They don't believe that it is, but they do believe if Trump is able to pull it out in Virginia, it's going to be over for President Biden, because this should be a state that no one really should be focusing on. Right. And if, President Biden has to start spending money and, doing things in the state of Virginia, then he's in some serious issues because, obviously we're looking at other critical states like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, sure, Michigan, the blue wall, as they've called it. Mm-hmm. So if he has to shift his attention away from any of those critical battleground states, then he has some serious issues.
So we had some primaries this past week, and one big name that faced a primary challenger was Tom Cole, a pretty important Republican congressman from Oklahoma. How did he do?
Yeah, he was able to pull it out. He was able to win. I think there was a lot of concern that he may actually have to face a runoff because he, had been challenged by a challenger who was very well funded. But at the end of the day, Cole did have Trump's endorsement. He is in charge of the Powerful Appropriations Committee on the House side, and he was able to pull it out at the end of the day. But I think a lot of people were thinking that he wasn't going to be able to win as easily as he did. But, the race technically wasn't really that close.
So, as we know, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell is stepping down from the Republican leadership at the end of this year, but he has some parting advice for Senate Republicans about how they should handle leadership going forward. What is it?
So the senator has been really outspoken about this. We've heard it in numerous of his meetings from sources, and he's even talked about it pretty publicly about the fact that he does not believe that GOP leadership in the Senate should have any kind of term limit. As we know, Senator McConnell had served for 18 years atop the Senate GOP. That's a really long time, and
clearly wasn't a believer in term limits on that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't be surprised, but he's trying to make the case that this will impact fundraising. He has a very successful super PAC that he is tied with that has raised tons of money for Senate GOP candidates. He also talked about how Senate Republicans would be at a disadvantage when you look at the comparisons to the House Speaker, since they don't technically have term limits. But, we've seen a lot of upheaval in the Senate, particularly among some of the Republicans who are more, aligned with President Trump, who are younger, who are, trying to make a name for themselves. Think about those folks who are really against the Ukraine funding and, are just more MAGA. And they have been really leading the charge, talking about how they believe that a Senate GOP leader should have term limits. And two of the senators who are running to replace McConnell have embraced that. Senator John Cornyn, who is the former majority whip at the time, who was term limited and had to step down in 2018, he has endorsed term limits, as well as Senator Rick Scott, which is not a surprise. He's been talking about that for a long time. Senator John Thune, who is in a lot of ways seen to be the front runner in this race since he is number 2 Republican in the Senate. He hasn't gone that far. He hasn't endorsed term limits, but he has talked about making an amendment process more robust, ensuring that other Republicans have their voices heard. So we will see what happens, but as you noted, the Senate Minority Leader has really sounded the alarm about the dangers of instituting some kind of term limit.
And some of the controversy does seem to be about some members of the conference feel like the whole conference should have more of their voices heard.
Absolutely. I think a lot of them felt that Senator McConnell did not represent their views and that he was just there as an institution for 18 years and now is only, the first time that there's going to be a new leader come November. Who that is, we don't know. But I think a lot of those younger Republican members want to see some changes made just so that one person doesn't stay in power forever.
They don't want to wait 18 years for their own opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. It's a long time, but you also have to look at the other side where McConnell has been a very effective leader. Right. He's been able to institute a lot of his agenda and raise a ton of money for Republicans. So you can see both sides.
Thank you, SJ.
Thank you.
You can read Samantha-Jo and the rest of our political team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.